Oh, to be a Baltimore Ravens fan. Oh, baby. I hope you enjoy your elite quarterback, Joe Flacco, for as long as you can. 2017, though, a season for the Ravens that you probably want to forget. A team that was good enough, in spite of massive flaws, especially offensively, to get to the playoffs, finding themselves in Week 17 in playoff position, to then only watch as, of all people, Andy Dalton cost them a trip to the playoffs. You got burned in Week 17 by a Bengals team led by Andy Dalton and Marvin Lewis that had nothing to play for. That's sad, borderline, pathetic. Not even borderline, that's just pathetic. Pathetic. And that is the Ravens, isn't it? No, they're not pathetic. But they have those moments in time where you're like, this team could be more. This team could do a whole lot more. And you wonder what holds them back. Well, last year we know the passing game for the Ravens largely stunk. Their receivers were not very good, and their quarterback wasn't very good. It's a familiar refrain, isn't it? So it's not a surprise in the offseason, after the disappointment of what happened in the playoffs, that this team addressed the wide receiver position significantly, bringing in Willie Snead, bringing in Michael Crabtree, bringing in John Brown, cutting this offseason former first-round pick and complete and total bust Breshad Perriman. This team needed to get better at wide receiver, and they need to get better at it now. And since this team can't draft the wide receiver position, they're going to continue to do what they do, which is bring in some veteran guys and hope that they can piecemeal it together for a season or two. And that's pretty much what you've got. Does a wide receiving core of Willie Snead, Michael Crabtree, and John Brown inspire fear in opposing defenses? No. Does a wide receiver core of Crabtree, Snead, and Brown represent an upgrade and a mighty upgrade over what they've had in Baltimore the past couple of seasons? I would say so. I mean, you've got some guys that can actually do something at the NFL level. They're not stars. They're not difference makers. You're not going to have an explosive passing game by any means, but it should be better. And then on defense, they brought in safety Tony Jefferson. Now you've got him paired with Eric Weddle, a pretty good safety tandem on a pretty good secondary. When you look at the Ravens and what they did in this year's draft, Ozzie Newsome's last draft as general manager, and just think about that. After over 2 decades of calling the shots, 2 Super Bowl championships, numerous playoff appearances, the Ozzie Newsome era is finally drawing to a close. And if he wasn't already a Hall of Famer as a player, he probably would be as an executive. That's simple. Even though the past few years I don't feel like have been Ozzie Newsome's best work, when you look at the body of work, the entirety of work, it is hard to deny his rightful place of being called an elite general manager in the history of the league. When you look at this team in the draft, it was an interesting philosophy. You end up with 2 first-round picks. First one, you trade down a little bit, and you end up getting Hayden Hurst, the tight end from South Carolina. Well-balanced, all-around skill set, talented, also 25. Sounds like he's not going to be ready physically to start the year. They need him to provide them something at the tight end position with some of the notable busts they've had at the draft in recent years there, be it the Max Williams of the world, the Crockett Gilmores of the world, or what have you. Then to turn around and think about the future, and this is kind of like Ozzie Newsome's gift to whoever happens to take over for him, even though we probably all know it's going to be DaCosta. Being able to get Lamar Jackson with the last pick of round number 1. Now, Lamar Jackson's not going to start now. He's not going to play now. And unless you're going to use him in some type of mini Cordell Stewart slash role, he's probably not going to play a ton as a rookie. And that's okay. In this particular case, it's okay. Although I would love to see Lamar Jackson get a shot, and I would love to see Lamar Jackson bring something different to that Ravens offense. For now, you've got so much money invested in the starting quarterback that you have. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to sit him on the bench, and that's just the way it is at this point. And they turned around and got a couple of Oklahoma guys. Not surprising to me that Ozzie wanted a couple of big school guys, even though it wasn't Alabama this time, and Mark Andrews and Orlando Brown. Mark Andrews should provide something at some point in time this year as a pass catcher. Orlando Brown, I think it's just a matter of time before Junior is manning the right tackle position for Baltimore. He's not at the moment, but it shouldn't be long. It's a draft class you look at and you say, well, there's a couple of guys that could provide some boost in the short term, but more so maybe in the long term, could shake out to be a pretty good last draft class for Ozzie. Now, as you look at this team on the field and what to expect on paper in 2018, what are the strengths of the team? I start off with the defense. Defense is pretty solid at all three levels. In particular, I really like their secondary. I think they're without Jimmy Smith a couple of games, but still a really good secondary unit. This is a team that plays really good defense for the most part, and it helps keep them competitive, and it keeps them in a lot of games. Then I look at the offensive side of the ball, and this is a team that showed once Alex Collins got the opportunity, what a great find he was for them, getting him off of waivers from Seattle. Being able to bring in Alex Collins, you've got a team now that you feel like can run the ball with some consistency and some purpose, which is helpful because, again, while I expect the wide receiving core to be improved, they're still not great. Your quarterback's not great. You play a good defense, you run the football, you've got a chance. But it does still make me concerned about that veteran receiving core when you have to start going and getting multiple guys via free agency. Like you look at Willie Snead was with the Saints. They didn't want him. Why not? The Raiders couldn't wait to cut Michael Crabtree. Why? John Brown was allowed to leave and come to Baltimore. Why? Now, these guys end up in other places for a reason. Now, it doesn't automatically mean that those other teams are right, but you're putting an awful lot of chips into this basket in long term. How much is that really going to pay out? And then I'm sorry, but there's got to be massive concerns about Joe Flacco. The dude picked the perfect time in that 2012 season to get hot for the playoffs, led his team to a Super Bowl. His team had no other choice but to pay him a crap ton of money. Then a few years later, had no choice but to pay him again another load of crap ton of money. And what have you really gotten for that? For all intents and purposes, this should be Joe Flacco's last season as a starter for the Baltimore Ravens. Now, that could mean that he has an extra chip on his shoulder. He's pissed off because the team drafted Lamar Jackson. He's pissed off because he doesn't feel like he's getting respected for what he's brought to the table. He's pissed off because he doesn't feel like he's ready to take a step back. Who knows? Sometimes when you bring in a young quarterback like this and everybody's angling for the heir apparent, the future of the franchise to take over, a veteran guy like Flacco could do one of two things. He can either elevate his game and play the best he ever has, or he can let the pressure get to him and be looking over his shoulder too much and he could stink up the joint. I don't know what to expect out of Flacco. Probably more mediocrity, though, let's be honest. When you look at this team's schedule, I look at a couple of stretches here. It's actually weeks 4 through 9, 6 straight weeks. You start off with weeks 4 through 6. You go to Pittsburgh, to Cleveland, to Tennessee. What's that, 3 straight road games, I think it is? 2 of them against divisional opponents, and then follow that up weeks 7 through 9. You got some quality teams on the schedule, New Orleans, then you go to Carolina, and then you host Pittsburgh. So for the Ravens, and depending on what happens with the Le'Veon Bell situation, they're potentially staring down the barrel of facing the Steelers once, maybe twice without the Steelers' franchise running back. That's promising for them. But they've got some other good, tough games on their schedule, and Pittsburgh's still tough even without Le'Veon Bell. Don't get it twisted. They still got Big Ben. They've still got Antonio Brown and an improved defense. The Ravens really need to make hay in that portion of the schedule. Weeks 4 through 6, you've got to sit there and do something against Pittsburgh, Cleveland, Tennessee, and then week 7 through 9 facing New Orleans, Carolina, Pittsburgh again. It's that stretch of schedule right there that I feel like is going to make or break this Ravens season. And if they don't come out of that unscathed or scathed very little, if they're at a point where they're 500 or under 500 after 9 weeks, then that has to be the time you go with Lamar Jackson. Because why are you going to sit there and ride out the string with Joe Flacco just to have another 8-8, 9-7 season and maybe make the playoffs and get bounced early or maybe miss the playoffs? I don't know. But I look at this team, and that's probably what they're going to do. They're going to ride Flacco all year. They'll probably end up winning 8, I think maybe 9 games. They might sneak into the wild card round. They might not. They'll probably just miss it. And then you'll look at it and be like, well, they wasted a season that Lamar Jackson could have got some tick. Yet another mediocre season from Joe Flacco. Imagine that, huh, Ravens fans?